Well, this is me. Stuck living in a small town but with a passion for street photography. So what did I do when I was desperate to make great street images but I was so uninspired by the place that I live? Did I give up? Did I find another hobby instead? Did I start taking product photos? Absolutely not. I went out time and time again, and through years of trial and error, I developed the skills to make great photographs even in a boring place. So what can we do to make amazing work in boring or quiet locations? Well, by the end of this video, I'm going to reveal 7 things any level of photographer can use to create stunning photos, regardless of the location. If we can do anything to quickly improve our street photography in a boring or quiet location, it's with creative framing. Try looking for something that might make for a good frame, and then wait for a subject to interact with the scene and come into the frame to then fire off an image. You can also try different angles as well, so if you found a good frame, see what it looks like from different perspectives to really work the scene and get the best out of the location. Alternatively, you can search out a subject or subjects and then look for ways to frame them up with something. Provide a bit of foreground interest, layering and complexity to elevate your shots with more visual interest. What we can use to frame subjects is limited only by our creativity. You can use anything from something obvious like a fence through to something a bit less obvious like using another person to make a frame for a subject. Once you start looking for things on the street that you can use for frames, then you begin to notice all the possibilities to make captivating shots. And this can suddenly make a boring place or a day with dull flat light vastly more interesting and fun to shoot in. Creative framing is a great starting point to make better photos in a boring place, but the next tip will definitely take your creativity to another level. Do you ever look at your photography and feel like it looks a bit simple, maybe even a bit basic, like there's something missing to it? Well, there's nothing wrong with minimalism, and actually we'll cover that a bit later on in the video, but a quick way to make better photos in a boring place is by introducing layering into your images. Try thinking about foreground, midground and background. If you can find something interesting to fill each of those spaces, then you can build up more captivating compositions in areas where there isn't much going on. For example, you can use a foreground element like a car reflection to add more depth to the scene. You might want to shoot through an object like a window or a bus shelter to create layers as well. Using an object to block out part of a frame can also be a great way to introduce a cinematic, voyeuristic feel, especially when you're using a longer lens. Another way to incorporate layering is to focus on abstraction. You can look for details and textures and also try to incorporate people into the shot in a more abstract way. Look for reflections such as puddles, windows, cars, anything with a reflective surface could potentially work. And the great thing about reflections is that they're everywhere, so even in boring places you can find something to make interesting photos from. When you're actively looking for things you can use to create layers and framing on the street, you'll start noticing interesting things you can use everywhere. And if you incorporate this with the next tip, you can make even more complex and varied images. When the weather's terrible and it's cold and wet and gloomy, it can be all too easy to use that as an excuse to stay inside and not go out and make photos, even though you might have a bit of free time. But if you can get past this, then going out in bad weather can vastly improve the options for great street photos in a boring place. For example, in the cold, windows fog up, or if it's been raining, you have wet reflective surfaces you can use to make great shots from. People with umbrellas, although maybe a bit cliche, can still make for really graphic, colourful photos too. If we only go out on good weather days, then our portfolios will just be of fair weather photos, and that can be a bit boring. So get your coat, grab an umbrella and embrace that bad weather. So we've covered making our photos more complex to make the most of a boring place, but what if we don't want to introduce layering? Well, instead we can do the complete opposite and strip our work right back, and the best way to do that is by knowing what to leave out of a frame. When I first started out in street photography, I was keen to try and pack the frame full of stuff, but often it would result in messy, unbalanced photos. When I figured out what to leave out of an image is just as important as what to include, then I realised the potential of minimalism. If you live in a small or boring location, minimalism could be just the thing you want to explore to still make amazing work. Firstly, you can try looking for a singular subject, a person wearing some eye-catching clothing for example. Then you can aim to frame them up either in some light or against a plain background to create a clean and minimalist shot. You can also try a bit of fishing as well, so you can wait around in the scene that you found, maybe a nice pool of light or a plain background, and then you just need to wait for someone to pass through to make a really clean, crisp, minimalist shot. As I mentioned already, when it comes to minimalist street photography, learning what to leave out of the frame can be just as powerful as deciding what to include. So you might want to use an object you found, say a colourful awning outside a shop front, and then you can use that to block out distracting elements from the scene, simplifying it right down to the essential components. On bright sunny days, even in a boring place, you're likely to find interesting light and shadow, and you can really use this to your advantage to make really cool minimal shots, maybe using silhouettes. Now, you might say the place that you live, there's nothing interesting to use for a background or something that you can make a minimalist shot from, but if you really go out and observe the street, find some plain background, it doesn't take much to to make a really great minimalist shot from. Just an interesting character, a nice pool of light or a cool background, and you can find those pretty much everywhere if you look hard enough. Although it's a great tool for street photography in a boring place, once you've experimented a lot with minimalism, it can, in my opinion, start to feel a bit samey. And your options for making original shots are quite limited after a while, but that leads us nicely into the next tip. In the small town where I live, there are a couple of shops, which recently when I was inside running some errands, I noticed some pictures on the walls lining the staircases, and I realised these were of the town more than 100 years ago. I was blown away by being able to look into the past and see how life was here way back then. If the photographer hadn't had the presence of mind to make those photos, we really wouldn't know what it looked like and maybe even felt like on the street right outside all those years ago. These photos are a wonderful window into the past. This is why street photography and capturing life and moments on the street is so important. We're documenting life, and in the future we'll be able to look back on how life once was, which to me is what holds such value and importance in the practice of documenting your streets. So how does this come into a boring or quiet location? Well, I would argue that there are moments of emotion and strangeness and beauty happening all around us wherever there are people, whether that's in a city like London or a small town in England. One of the most important elements of a great street photo is that special moment. And in a small or boring place, we just have to work harder to find the moments and make sure we're ready to capture them when they present themselves. When I really started looking for meaningful moments of emotion, strangeness or character, then my street photography started to get so much better. Wherever you live, head out on the weekend, find the busiest spot in town and see what you can find. Sure, it's going to be harder than a big city, but if you're always looking for moments and always have a camera on you, you'll be surprised at what you can get. The more time you spend out observing people, seeing how they interact and the common themes that come up in human behaviour, the more you'll be able to anticipate moments occurring on the street, and the better your photos will become as a result of that. When you do see that incredible moment happen right before your eyes, you have to be absolutely engaged and ready to capture it with your camera, otherwise it'll be lost forever. And that's why the next tip is vital. Street photography is so much about reacting to the environment and trying to predict moments before they happen. Have you ever seen that great shot unfold in front of you but you didn't have your camera ready, or there was no battery or your settings were wrong? Yeah, me too. When moments are few and far between, you need to be ready at all times, and there are a few different things you can do to make sure you're ready when the right moment comes along. I'm not going to get into settings in this video, but you need to know your camera. If you don't feel confident on how to use your camera, then it's vital to get to grips with how it works in different conditions and also how to achieve different effects. Once you learn your camera inside and out, then you can devote your time to practicing capturing moments, composition, and really developing your eye on the street. The next thing that completely changed my street photography when I picked it up, even though it's a simple thing, was getting a wrist strap. This meant that my camera was always ready to go in my hand, but also safe from any accidental drops or someone trying to grab it. Being able to move your camera about freely is so important in helping you never miss a shot. When you're in an area with the potential for some great shots, then don't hold your camera by your side. Have it up near your face or at shoulder height. This will mean that you're less likely to put someone off when you raise your camera to your face. And lastly, get used to looking down the street to anticipate moments. It can be easy for us to just look at what's directly in front of us, but if you're constantly looking as who's coming or what's happening a bit further down the street, you give yourself more time to anticipate a moment before it happens and be ready for when what you've seen comes into your camera range. I'll keep this one short and sweet. While there might not be much going on in your town day to day, there might be organised events that you have to take advantage of. Any local events that are likely to have a large congregation of people means you have a lot more options for street photography. For me, in the town where I live, normally there really isn't much going on day to day, but luckily there are quite a lot of events that happen throughout the year that I always try to attend to take advantage of for street photography. My favourite event to photograph now is the day at the races, which is such a great place to capture human behaviour. Of course, I know not everyone has a racecourse in their town, but if you can find even a small event near you, the chances of coming away with photographs you're really happy with, or even just a chance to practice without people really noticing or caring what you're doing, greatly increases. But what if, no matter what you do, there just isn't enough going on where you live and you've lost inspiration to go out and shoot? Heading to far-flung locations is the dream for many photographers, and travel is one of the things that I love to do most in life since I first went abroad on my own in my early 20s. There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to a new place with a completely different culture and immersing yourself in the environment, exploring the world with your camera. But what if you can't travel? You don't have the budget, you have other commitments, or you just don't have the time for it? Well, we don't need to go far. Just the process of getting on the train or the bus to the closest big town or city can spark our inspiration and give us more opportunities to experiment with the things I've mentioned in this video. These tips have really helped me improve my street photography in small and boring locations, until I noticed that I wasn't really getting better as fast as I'd like. Over time I realised I picked up some pretty bad habits along the way which were really holding my work back. So to make sure you're not making the same mistakes as me, check out this video next. As always, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.